TV and Virgin Media Channel 927.
Hello, John Locke here, and you're listening to Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs show on Talksport. You lucky devils.
So sincere. Chatted to John Gorman in the last hour, who was Glenn Hoddle's assistant with England. Off the back, some comments by Rio Ferdinand in the Sun today saying that he felt there was a definite style of play under Glenn. Everybody knew where they stood, and it was looking like it was going to shape up and run right through the whole system from youth level right up to the senior side. Failings of English football, a lot of people have tried to tackle. We've all looked at the reasons and the solutions. Matthew Whitehouse is a UEFA A coach. He's written the way forward, solutions to England's football failings, and he joins us now. Matthew, good afternoon.
Afternoon, guys. How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, good, thanks. Let's start with what, in your eyes, and what you found through your research and putting this book together, as briefly as you can, and that's a huge topic. What did go wrong? What was the catalyst for this sort of fall away from the fact we were sort of giants of world football at one point?
Well, I tried to give as comprehensive analysis as I could on the book, and it is a big topic. I think you have to go back to the past, talk about Charles Hughes and the English philosophy at the FA. Direct football was a major problem for English football, because what happened was we just started to develop coaches and players who would just hoof the ball forward. Effectively, we just bypassed everything that was good about the other nations, such as Brazil, Holland, and what they were producing, which was players who could get the ball down, play with skill and technical ability. And what's happened in the last 30, 40 years is that's where English football has gone. It's only been in the last 10 years that we've changed that. And that's such a slow process that is happening that, unfortunately, we're being left behind by a lot of nations now.
But the 1966 and the 1970 team that Paul was talking about in the break there, they didn't play like that, did they?
Well, I think this is what happened after that. That's when guys called Alan Wade and Charles Hughes came into the FA. And what they did was, effectively, they coached coaches. So they developed a national style where coaches came through the system, and those coaches were put into clubs, and that became the philosophy of the English game. So it became very barbaric. Obviously, the two exceptions to that are Liverpool and Forest, and the Shankly and Clough, and they started to play the ball on the floor, and then look at the results that came from it. It just amazes me how, obviously, we didn't use those as a template, and instead we went through the FA's way.
Charles Hughes' book, The Winning Formula, as you said, was the Bible for the coaches then, and the idea was to get the ball into areas where you could hurt the opposition most as quickly as possible, wasn't it? It was front to back. That was the thinking. I remember I was working on 90 Minutes, and we had a conversation, an interview with John Cartwright, who worked at Charlton, I think, at the time. He was one of the first dissenting voices to say, we can't keep playing like this. We're going to get left behind. That was in the early 90s.
Oh, absolutely. I think John Cartwright did work with the FA, but he's a very strong proponent against what the FA put in place, and he did try to change things, but I think he was held back from that. And he definitely talks about the need that we need skillful players. We need players who are comfortable with the ball, and that is where English football should have gone. And unfortunately, that never happened. And only now we're starting to see those changes come in. And it is a real shame that the English game, like you said, has been left behind. And we're seeing nations now that are just getting so much farther ahead than us that it's very worrying.
The current vogue is to blame foreign players in the Premier League. Is there an element of truth in that?
In the book I talk about foreign players, and unfortunately foreign players are probably better than our English ones. That is the truth. What needs to happen, though, is that there needs to be a change in the youth academy, which is a big part of the book. Unfortunately, we're getting players coming in at 16 years old from foreign countries, which it is stopping our players from developing in those key years after, between 17 to 21. The homegrown rule's a problem, because it actually allows you to bring in foreign players and use them as homegrown. So really, the Premier League does need to change that. But whether they've got the political willpower to do that, or the clubs will hold them back,
that's one of the battles. That's one of the battles that maybe Greg Dyke will be having with the Premier League, because, as you say, you can bring in players, and after 2 or 3 years, they're kind of assimilated, and they count as homegrown players.
Precisely. So you've got 8 players there you have to have in your squad, and 8 of those could be foreign players. And so these rules have become so ambiguous that really we haven't. The idea was to try and improve our development of players, but actually it's brought foreign players in younger to allow them to get past the rules. So again, they found a way to get through it, which has stopped our English players developing.
So Trevor Brooking was in last week with Adrian and Goffey on Drive, saying that he feels by 2020 we'll be in a good place. It's going to be slow progress, but the wheels are in motion. And from what you've seen and what you've researched through the book, would you agree with that? You think we're starting to head in the right direction or not?
I'd have to question that, to be honest. I think it's much better than it was 10 years ago, but unfortunately nations have gone further than us. So although we might be better than we were, other nations are better than us by a long way.
How much of it is this mental attitude, though, with young British players? I've seen at Chelsea a lot of young British players that I've looked at and thought, he's good, he's going to be great, he's going to save us a lot of money. And somehow, they get sidetracked, they get big contracts, they just don't train on, they go out on loan, and it just doesn't happen. And you get frustrated there because you think, when you first see them, you think, oh, this player's brilliant.
No, I agree on that completely. I think Chelsea and Man City, unfortunately, although they're very good developers of talent, I think Chelsea got some great youth players. Lewis Baker is a quality player. However, if you don't get the experience between 17 to 21 in top-level football, we're not talking just this under-21 league that the EPPP has put forward. We're talking experience of Champions League games, of the pressure involved in that. And unfortunately, at Chelsea and Man City and the big clubs, they're not going to get that opportunity. Now, unless there's a rule change, again, that says you must play 2 or 3 under-21 players, to get them that experience. However, or you're just going to have to leave the club and go and get experience from elsewhere. Tom Ince went to Blackpool, and I think he's excelled from doing that, from leaving Liverpool. But in the book I speak about players having to move abroad. There's leagues like Holland, Belgium, France that are giving young players chances to play, but they haven't got the funds that the Premier League has.
Yeah, it's also getting the right loan as well. We've seen players go out and loan, and it just hasn't worked. And they're still on somebody else's bench. You think, what was the point of that?
No, I agree on that. And this is why the B team aspect of what Barcelona do so well is that they have continuity. So if you play for their B or C team, you're still Barcelona. You're still learning the tactical elements of that. And what seems to be happening now, I've noticed this summer, is that Premier League clubs are investing in lower league teams. And actually they're going to send players to there and make them into almost their B team. Now, if that does happen, actually that's the way the league is now. Unfortunately, there's a lot of lower league clubs who haven't got any money, so those top clubs can fund them and actually help them create a B team aspect, which might actually help those players get the development years they need. Because if they just stay in the youth and the reserves, they won't get to the levels that we need, and that's what's struggling right now, because we're not seeing enough English players getting the experience in the top leagues, playing Champions League football. It's a worrying time.
Do you think the quality of coaching has improved at grassroots level? You kids at 6, 7, 8 when they're first getting into football, do you think that's getting better?
Again, I as much as you want to be positive about it, my experience is that it's not. The quality at that level isn't good enough. I look at that as the foundation level, and I think if you affect players' ability there in a positive or negative sense, that will go into their future. And unfortunately, coaches there are taking talent or taking the skill away from players. It's a negative mindset that they're planting in players. They're taking away their skill, their experiment, their creativity. And what you get left with then between 12 to 16 are players who haven't got the technical skills to be pushed on. So it's a massive area for the FA, and that's where the FA really need to affect, is that grassroots game. If they can improve the coaching and improve the players, and it will give the academies a much bigger pool of talent to work from, that we can then actually push players on.
So the big question is, can it be fixed?
It can be, but it will take all the organisations to work together as a unit, almost having a role that they all play. So like I said, I think the FA really need to invest in the grassroots game, development centres across the country they can put in place. So effectively, what you get then is a tier system. So the grassroots to the development centres to the academies, and actually give them that ability for players to move upwards. Right now, there's a massive gap between grassroots and the academy system, and I'm seeing the difference in quality. I've worked in the academy, I saw the grassroots, and the gap between those players is too large. There needs to be something in the middle to bridge that gap.
The problem is, though, finally, is that you've got so many layers of self-interest to work through. You think of all those kind of, let's use that phrase, stakeholders that we need to get together to make this kind of great idea you have happen. There's so much self-interest built into that. You wonder how they're all going to get around the table and make it work.
No, I agree on that. I mean, the Premier League is it's a beast, and it's going to be very difficult to influence those owners as such. And in a way, the Premier League's got so far away from us now. If you compare it to Germany with the 50+1 rule, it enables them to have that supporters' power as such, so that we can almost think nationalistic about it. Whereas in England now, the foreign owners are just dominating. Now, have they got the interest in the national team, or is it a selfish financial interest? That is a big issue. So it might be that we have to look to the Football League and the grassroots game and look to try and build up that part. And then maybe we look to try and give them opportunities away from the Premier League to let these players develop, because there is a dearth of talent across Europe of English players.
We could talk about this for ages, and unfortunately we've run out of time. But just very, very briefly, I mean, in your book, do you look at the idea of the problems of playing for England? I mean, even when you see even top players like Steven Gerrard, they never quite play as well for England as they do for their countries. I mean, for their clubs rather.
Well, definitely. I mean, I talked about the golden generation as such, and what happened, and really it was a formational issue. The philosophy in the English game has been 4-4-2. I know you spoke earlier about Glenn Hoddle, and he started to bring through a modern approach to England. Playing 3-5-2, 5-2, trying to overload the midfield areas to try and give us some ability to keep the ball. However, after that, you got Keegan and then Ericsson. So Ericsson's very much of an Anglophile. He loved the 4-4-2. And what you got there was people like Paul Scholes playing on the left wing. Now, this guy's the best playmaker that we probably produced, and he's out on the left wing. And then he retired in 2004. Gerrard and Lampard don't work in a 2 because they're similar players. We never had a Carrick behind them. So in a way, that the philosophy of English football ruined what actually was a good generation of players because we were too rigid, we're too structured in what we wanted to do. And I cover all this in the book, and like I said, I tried to make it a comprehensive analysis of everything. And there's a lot there, can't talk about that in the space of this time.
No, sure.
But I mean, I do hope that it does make an influence and a difference to people.
We wish you well with it. Thanks very much.
I appreciate that, guys.
Matthew Whitehouse there. The Way Forward Solutions to England's Football Failings is available now. People can get it sort of on Amazon.
Amazon, you can find it on there, yeah. Absolutely,
fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, good to talk to you. Thanks.